Time management in take-home assignments. Hi, it's Joel again. This time we're looking at how to manage your time during a take-home assignment. You still need to manage your time, even if you have a day or days to complete the assessment. Efficient usage of time will mean that you obviously will not run out of time to do your best on particular questions of the paper, and it will ensure that you don't run out of stamina to give each question the focus it needs. A good process for approaching a take-home assignment as soon as the clock starts is as follows. Firstly, when the assessment opens, calmly read through the entire paper. Don't just read the first question and then start working on the first question. Read the entire paper. This will give you an understanding of where your mind needs to turn during this paper. What topics, what legal principles, what legal problem-solving tools. Now, don't panic if there is a question or questions that throw you off a bit. Highlight these questions and you can give your proper focus to them. You might spend a little bit more time on these problematic questions than the ones that you are quite comfortable with. Make sure, however, that you are still giving the right amount of time and effort onto the questions that you're comfortable with. Step 2, move on to allocating your word count. This is a step that many students see as a bit of a waste of time, something that doesn't need to be done and that you'll figure out later. It's worth spending a couple minutes, even in a formal exam, let alone take-home assignments as we're talking about now. Take a moment and allocate your word count to each individual question and each individual part. In a formal exam, you would do the same thing, but you would do it with time rather than word limit. Now, for take-home assignments, we're talking about allocating your word count. Divide the maximum word count by the total number of marks. You then have the words that are permitted for each mark in the paper. Then you can figure out a particular question's word count by multiplying the words permitted for each mark by the amount of marks allocated to the question. You can write this type next to your question numbers, and then you can regularly highlight what you've got so far and compare it to the word count that you can allocate to that particular question. It gives you a little bit of accountability. It tells you how much information you should be providing. Am I getting close? But it may also tell you that you're using too many words. You may go, I've already blown half my word count, but I've only dealt with one of the 4 issues. That means that you need to dial back the words that you're using to approach those issues. Not only does this allow you to gauge where you're up to with a particular question, it also might indicate to you that certain questions could require a little more words than you have allocated, and others might be answered with less words. And you may shift around words and put words into questions that require more explanation and more written analysis. However, again, like we were talking about time management, make sure that you do not allocate too few words to a problem. That is, make sure to answer each question as thoroughly as the question requires. Now, step 3 is time management. You may want to do this with a take-home assignment, you may not. It depends on how long it's open. If it's open for 5 hours or so, you should allocate your time management. You can do this by figuring out the proportion of each question's marks to the total mark, and then divide your time accordingly. I.e., if there's a question that's worth 25 marks out of 100 and you've got 4 hours, you should give that an hour. Now, if your take-home assignment is greater than 5 hours, perhaps it's 24, 48, you may not do as much strenuous time management and time allotment. You may just want to kind of keep track. This is what I want to get done in this hour session, 2-hour session, whatever. Now, step 4. It is important to remember that briefly scaffolding your answer prior to jumping into the writing of your response is totally okay, and you probably should do it. Scaffolding first will save you time later when you panic about whether you've missed something in your response or whether you have or haven't adequately answered the question. By scaffolding, you can tick things off and you can go, I've treated that issue, I've applied those rules, whatever the case might be. Now, I'm going to give an example. Say that you have a copyright infringement question and all issues are on the table and nothing is limited there. You might want to scaffold for this response in this way. First, you'd have a heading for copyright subsistence. You'd be looking at, does copyright actually subsist in the work that we are talking about? Then you'd have a second heading, copyright ownership. You would deal with the issue of whether the relevant person claiming that they own the copyright does in fact own the copyright. Then you'd have a heading on infringement. You might even have subheadings under this for particular issues like limitation periods, primary, contributory, vicarious liability, all those sorts of things. And then finally, you might have a heading for remedies if the question wanted that kind of treatment. Now, step 5. You should also remember that headings are definitely permitted in take-home assignments and most assignments. And you should be encouraged to do so, especially for a problem question. Headings are a great tool to effectively guide your response. You might actually find it helpful to start putting in your headings before you start drafting your response. It may keep your mind dedicated to specific issues as you go along. Now, for essay-based questions, headings might not be appropriate, especially for responses that are only 600 words or 700 words, etc. That's really too few words to warrant headings. You're more talking about a couple thousand words. Headings might be very helpful. Now, that was time management for take-home assignments. The big key principle is take some time at the start to plan and manage your time, manage your words, etc. And you'll save yourself time later when you're panicking because you've got a plan, you can follow the plan, and that'll give you a little bit of surety and you might not be quite as nervous. The other thing though is to be flexible. If the plan starts to go out the window, you need to shift accordingly and do the things within the time limit and the word count that are going to get you the most marks. Don't spend time dealing with little tiny small minor issues or little mark questions that aren't going to get you the big marks. Focus on what you need to do to get the highest marks possible.